Welcome to the Rebel Souls podcast, where we flip the middle finger to the status quo. I'm your host, Shelley Paxton, lifelong rebel, liberator of souls, and author of Soulbatical, a corporate rebel's guide to finding your best life. Settle in as we dive deep with badass leaders who are rebelling for what matters most in life, business, and the world at large. I'm so happy you're here. Let's get this revolution started. Before we begin, I want to share an offering from my soul to yours. If you've achieved traditional success only to realize that you're living someone else's dream, then this will start you on a profound journey toward becoming chief soul officer of your own life, just like I did. I'm gifting you a free chapter from my book, Soulbatical, a corporate rebel's guide to finding your best life. It's called Liberating from the Shackles of Should. And if you're ready to, then visit soulbatical.com to download it for free. That's SOULBATICAL.com. Warning, side effects include intense joy and fulfillment. Hello and welcome back, my fellow Rebel Souls. This is your host and OG Rebel Soul, Shelley Paxton. It is so good to be having this conversation, not the least of which, because here in the United States, it is the dawn of a new day and the beginning of a new chapter. I'm recording this episode and this conversation with Dalia the day after the inauguration, the Biden-Harris inauguration, and I have goosebumps from head to toe, and I'm actually like tingling as I'm telling you this, but I am still feeling in my bones at a cellular level, I love to say, the words of Amanda Gorman, the youth poet laureate who I think blew the world away. The last time I looked, her Instagram had gone from, I don't know, thousands of followers to 2.7 million followers. Everyone fell in love with her. And I think we have literally broken her Instagram in our showering of love because she put the pain and the hope of this country and the world into the most beautiful words. Like her poetry just sang, and it landed so deep in all of our hearts and souls, and was what this country and I believe the world needed to start its healing journey. And I don't want to make this political, which is why I don't want to talk about this in any more depth. And I want to focus on her and highlight her, because we'll put a link in the show notes. If you have not seen the poem that she read as part of the inauguration ceremonies, you've got to listen to it. And it ends with a call to all of us to be the light. And I couldn't think of something that just summarizes my worldview and my philosophy on everything, on being, on showing up in the world, on the energy that we bring to everything we do. I couldn't summarize it better than be the light. And the fact that that's the call to leadership for the future of this country and this world is so powerful. And she spoke it in a way I don't think any of us will ever forget. I've watched it no less than 4 times and teared up every single time. And like I said, I'm still tingling. And the reason why I say this is, one, I wanted to speak what I'm feeling and just how deeply moved I am by that, and how deeply hopeful I am by what is to come and what we can all create together, especially as we hopefully soon start to move into a post-COVID world. And be the light felt like such a powerful context for my conversation with Dalia Feldheim. This Rebel Soul conversation, you guys, it's a mic drop a minute. And the best way I can describe it is it's like a mashup of masterclasses. It's a masterclass in soul. It's a masterclass in leadership and business. It's a masterclass in psychology. And even deeper than that, it's a masterclass in like neuroscience that informs all of that. The beautiful thing about Dalia is that, and this is how she became such a brilliant marketer, and I'll tell you about her background in a minute. She is equal parts art and science. She is equal part, the feminine and the masculine. And Lead Like a Girl is all about leading from the heart and leading with purpose and empowerment and coming with your whole self to work or to your work, whatever that looks like, and creating the cultures to enable that. For all of us to bring our whole selves and our superpowers and our beautiful feminine energy, whether we are men or women, to this world when it needs it the most. And that feels like the light to me. We've seen female leaders lead through COVID more powerfully and more successfully than male leaders in this world today. Jacinda Ardern and Angela Merkel from New Zealand and Germany are two examples. And we dive into why we need more of this and what does that even mean. And Dalia really vulnerably tells her own story from having spent 17 years as a marketer at Procter & Gamble, the world's biggest consumer packaged goods company, and working on some powerful brands with award-winning campaigns that were really purpose-driven and that challenged, I should say purpose-driven, and that challenged the status quo. And that really got deep into the hearts of their customers. And then her own experience inside the walls of Procter & Gamble versus some other cultures she eventually went to, and the stark contrasts that made her realize that leading like a girl is a superpower that the world needs more of. And that's led to her purpose and her work in the world now, and her focus on resilience and joy and people and positivity and all these things in the workplace, and psychological safety and how we create those cultures. And she shares so much of her story, even the story that she told on the TEDx stage, which we'll link to. But this one, you guys, it's really powerful. And I'm excited that this is coming early in the year because it feels like an infusion of the light and the soul and the energy that we need in the world right now. And it is so aligned with everything I preach about soulbatical and rewriting the script of success. This is rewriting the freaking script of leadership. And we all need to hear it, because it feels like one big badass permission slip to bring all of our authentic selves to the work that we do in the world and lead from the heart and soul. So I'm going to leave you with that. I know you're going to love this conversation. Be prepared to hit rewind and want to take notes and want to dive deeper into Dalia's work in the world, because it is really timely. And I promise you, you're going to be rooting for her book to find a publisher so that we can all read it and share it with our teams and maybe even give it to a few of those leaders who, weren't so progressive. You know who I'm talking about. And we all have them in our lives. But I don't want to end on a bad note or a negative note. So let's be the light, you guys, in every aspect of our lives, and most importantly, in our leadership. Enjoy the conversation with Dalia. Let's dive in. Hey, welcome back, you guys. And here we are with my friend Dalia. Dalia, I am so excited for this conversation. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a huge pleasure being with a soul sister like you, Shelley.
100% soul sister. You and I were introduced through like mutual friends and colleagues last year. And it was one of those like instant connections. And we've stayed in touch ever since. And I'm incredibly grateful. And I've been waiting for this moment when you and I get to have one of our soul sister conversations in this forum where all of our fellow rebel souls get to listen and eavesdrop in on all of your pearls of wisdom. So let's start with, my favorite question. What are you rebelling for?
I love that question, first of all. So I am rebelling for leaders, women and men, daring to lead from their heart. So this means really bringing back into the workplace our passion, our purpose, perseverance, people, positivity. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But, this daring to lead from the heart. I recently heard from my friend and mentor, Paul Polman, that he keeps referring to the word courage, as one of the most misunderstood words. People understand it to mean taking decisions that others don't, etc. But courage actually comes from the French word cœur, which means heart. So it's really those courageous leaders that lead from the heart. And sadly, we're not seeing enough of that today. Sadly, we have too much of the archaic, more masculine leadership style, competition, power over people. And I've seen it's not effective. So I am rebelling for bringing back our hearts into the workplace.
Oh my God, so beautifully stated. And you know how passionate I am about this. I mean, when I talk about Soulbatical, it's all about living and leading with more authenticity, more courage, and more purpose. So you hit on two of those three pillars, right? And actually the third one fits right in too, but that's exactly it. And it's one of the reasons I've studied Brene Brown's Dare to Lead work and became a certified facilitator in her work, because the dare to lead, like daring leadership model, like there's just not enough of it. She says daring leadership versus armored leadership, and armored leadership is kind of that archaic model you talk about, right? It's power over, and there isn't vulnerability, and it isn't leading from the heart, right? It's more outside versus inside. So I love, and I'm so curious, I want to dig into your experience, because so I know a lot about you because you and I have had some amazing conversations over the course of the past year, and I want everybody to learn more about you. So the reason you have the really wicked cool accent that you have is because you're Israeli, right?
A complete mix, yes. I'm British Israeli. So made in England, born in Israel, as my mom came over pregnant. But my accent became a total mess. I've been outside of Israel now 22 years around the world. So yeah, I like the guessing name, but people never guess where I'm from. So
Oh, I like that. Well, that's part of your mystery, girl. You got to hold on to that. I think that's amazing. And you're coming to me from Singapore. So that's where you've been for, I know, for quite a while. And well, the reason I brought up the Israeli thing is it's like, to me, you have like badass rebel in your blood, right? Like when I first met you and as I've like read more about you, I'm like, damn, this woman used to be a platoon commander in the Israeli army. Like she has got it in her blood. So it's really interesting to me that you have that background. You've been in business for more than 20 years. You've been an executive in the marketing space, much like me. This is a big place where you and I first bonded. And you're talking about leading from the heart. So help me make sense of all of that.
So I'll share a little bit, my story and maybe how I got to rebelling for leading for this cause, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, I grew up in Israel. They always said that I had healthy chutzpah. Chutzpah is a Yiddish word that means, daring and cheekiness. Okay, so challenging the norms. I was a competitive gymnast, and as you said, a platoon commander, which I bring up. I always call it my crash course in perseverance. Right, at 19, leading 250, soldiers. It's you're thrown straight into it, and I think it was a really meaningful experience. I studied psychology and business, and we keep on saying my feet are on the ground, but my head is in the sky. So that's where the business, grounding, and the psychology. And I've always been really passionate about both. And actually, I was supposed to continue into a master's in psychology straight from university, but then Procter & Gamble came to the university, and it was a big deal because it was the first time that they came to recruit. So I'm like, okay, let me apply. And then I got accepted, and I came to my boyfriend then. I'm like, hey, I got accepted, Procter & Gamble, Geneva. And he's like, whoa, skiing in Geneva, let's go. So lucky for me, I have a crazy entrepreneur husband that kind of loves adventure as much as I do. So we packed and moved to Geneva with the intent of staying just a few years. Those few years stayed, 23 years now we're outside of Israel. So we've been in Geneva, we moved to Moscow for 3 years, back to Geneva. We moved to Singapore in 2010, where we've been since then. But yeah, that's a little bit, my background. But I think, the big thing and where we connected is this whole area of, soul, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, I was very happy to discover that leadership is all about, the psychology and business. And if you don't have that soul at work, you're not bringing your full self to work. So I'll tell you when, it landed with me.
Yes, keep preaching. I feel like I'm in church right now, the kind of church I like to go to. No, this is awesome. Okay, keep going. Because, when you say the word soul, I lean 4 more inches closer to my screen. So go for it.
No, it's actually, when I reflect back on my 17 years in P&G, I think the, success that I had there, because the company was very conducive for me bringing my full self to work and kind of really being people first and purpose driven. So I remember, I just started, and we were all, we were losing share in Israel and among 18-year-olds. So where are 18-year-olds in Israel? They're all in the army, right? So then I said, let's do a program, an army sampling for all the women entering the army. But in order to convince the army, we had to come up with a nice idea. So we created this wash pack that was really functional with places for tampons and pads, etc. And we convinced the army. The army thought it was a great idea. And, just before we launched, I was sitting in my office and I'm like, yeah, I know it's a very valuable kind of gift, but I want more. And I was, I want to write a letter that will really talk to their hearts, as an ex-platoon commander a few years just before. So I sat down and I started writing, and I really put myself in, their shoes, sitting on the bus, saying goodbye to their parents, going into the unknown, coming back once every 2-3 weeks. I just sat and I, of course, talked about, hygiene in the army and why we created this, but I also talked about how proud they should be, serving as equal, right? And it was just the whole kind of really, and as an ex-platoon commander, you should be very proud of yourself, etc. So I fell asleep, and in the office the next day, my boss came into the office and he's like, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "Oh, I just wrote this note as a inspiration for the agency." And he was kind of, "Can I see the notes?" And he immediately teared up. Okay. I had an amazing first boss that taught me all about connecting to our feminine energy and hearts. And he's like, "Dalia, I want you to sign this note with your real name, ex-platoon commander. We're shipping it as is."
Oh my God, I have head to toe chills as you say that. I did not know any of this.
So I told you I have a lot of things you don't, I'll bring up. So anyway, so we shipped it out. And what's most amazing is 2 days after kind of the initiative started, I was, our consumer service, we were inundated with calls from girls and moms just saying, "Thank you for being there at such an important," look, I'm tearing up. And such an important moment. And, my daughter now is 18. She went back to Israel to do the army. I can totally resonate with all of that. And, when I got these calls back, I realized that I'm not in the business of selling pads. I'm in the business of people empowerment and women empowerment. And that's when it landed, that was kind of my purpose. And I can tell you that, that's what led me throughout my career. I have a lot of many similar different stories of kind of bringing it to life around the world. But it was really this notion that I'm here to do something bigger than just sell.
And that gets at purpose, right? And I know you talk about purpose-driven leadership too, but when I think about it, it's like, yeah, you hit on people. Like people empowerment to me is the definition of leadership.
Yeah.
Like how beautiful, right?
Yeah. And I can tell you, it was, maybe I'll just share the story of kind of, so that was kind of the beginning for me. But maybe I'll, if you ask me what I'm most proud of about this kind of people. So people is both your team that you're working directly with, but, also, the consumers that I was serving, the customers, really, really thinking about what are my, what is purpose? What are my strengths? What am I passionate about? And how can I make a contribution in the world? And maybe I'll share one more story. And, just kind of that's when I talk about purpose, I bring out this story. It's a story I don't tell very often. So 2 of these stories, I think I haven't spoken.
Yeah, bring it on before we get to the juicy TEDx talk too. I want to hear this.
So this didn't go into the TEDx because TEDx needs to be just 11 to 12 minutes. But so this one is, so I grew up with P&G with this passion of, both in the people development, I ended up with my boss creating a course on people development. And it was not only my own people, it was people outside the organization. We had, I established a women's network in Moscow and later in Singapore. So it was very clear, as a leader, that my key role is developing others. Okay. Simon Sinek says it's nicely, a leader, you're not leading the business, you're leading the people that lead the business. We can talk more about that. But it would also enable me to connect with the people also in the day-to-day work, be it customers, consumers. So I'll tell you just one more story and then we can get into the TEDx. But so in 2010, I moved to Singapore. It was also one of these, crazy entrepreneur, it was the place to be, fast growing, etc. My key market was India. And I can tell you, I fell in love with women in
Mm.
India.
You're
I think
speaking to my soul. It's the same reason I have my nose pierced. It's because I was so inspired by all the time I spent in India.
in general, women in developing market, but, I just landed there. It was 2011. I was on the outskirts of Mumbai. I still remember I landed at 7 p.m. And as I was driving to the hotel, I suddenly caught a glimpse of this girl reading a book, but she didn't have electricity. So she was reading to the light of the passing cars.
Mm.
Okay, that's commitment for you. So anyway, the next morning we are doing consumer in-homes, as in marketing, how important we go into, live as understand how they're living and how our products can better help their lives. So anyway, we go into this house. It was a middle class house, and we walk in and we see this girl that we came to speak with sitting on the floor. Her mom comes in and she's serving us drinks, and then she's serving her on the floor in metal plates.
Hmm.
We were kind of a little puzzled. Literally, she was kind of sitting, I still remember vividly, she was sitting against a blue wall, and where she was sitting was kind of, worn out, as if she sits there often. Anyway, aunts and uncles come in and they're greeting her mom, and then they're greeting her on the floor. And for a moment, I caught this glimpse in her eye, this, as the uncle greeted her, this embarrassment, this sadness. I couldn't exactly put my, finger on it. So anyway, we leave the house and I told the agency, well, what was that all about? And she said, well, she was on her period. And I say, well, so what? She said, well, we in India have all these myths about period, that you're impure. So you're not allowed to go into the kitchen. You're not allowed to sit with us. And in many houses, you're not allowed even to sleep. So the girl literally sits and sleeps on the floor. And I was like completely taken aback. Think about the embarrassment that teenagers already have for being in the period. And then, this uncle, I could understand the sad look. The uncle comes in and suddenly everyone knows that she's on her period and she's kind of shown, as impure, as dirty. I couldn't sleep the whole night. I can tell you, that everything I could think about was that sad look on the girl.
Yeah, of
And
course.
so then I told the agency, I'm like, we need to do something about it. And she said, listen, but it's culture, it's myth. And she said, but yeah, I too, the reason for it originally was positive, to allow women to rest for that week. But today it evolved into something that's kind of, denigrating. And so I said, listen, I'm a foreigner, but we need to do something about this. So why don't you take it, and let's see what we can do. And a year later, we decided to come at it from more of a humor point of view. And when she was explaining to me the myth, she told me, Dalia, yeah, it's crazy. We even believe a woman on her period is not allowed to touch pickles because she will make them go sour. Okay, rot. And, it's a very established myth. So our campaign ended up being, I dared, I touched the pickle. And it's all about a granddaughter talking to her grandma about, I did, I wore white, I went out, I went to school, I touched the pickle. And I can tell you, I'm proud of a lot of things in my career, but that went crazy. The most viral ad in 2014, there were TED Talks about it, Bollywood actress. It really started, women empowerment before Me Too. And I'm bringing that as an example of how at work, I today work with clients on finding your purpose, and it doesn't always mean leaving and kind of living in the Himalayas, okay? And often it's about how you can bring more of you, of what you're passionate about, into helping the business. And there was always business results associated, but through connecting with our consumers with the heart. So that's just a little bit about, the background that, the 17 years in P&G that I call them my years of flow, when I realized how important, I mean, you know the term flow, Mikai, Csikszentmihalyi, it's a name that's hard to pronounce, but the Czech positive psychologist that talks all about the importance of flow at work. And this is like meditation in action. It's being in the zone. It's really knowing what you're good at and just, doing it with all your passion. So for me, that was the great example of how I want everyone in the workplace to be, bringing their full self and their passion and purpose to work every day.
And I love that story. I mean, actually both of those stories, I have goosebumps, and it makes me think of, I mean, it's heart-led leadership and so purpose-driven. I mean, I'm still reflecting on your words of like, we're all part of humanity, part of our humanness is that we're striving to be bigger than something bigger, to be part of something bigger than ourselves. Right. Yeah. And it really does come from inside of us and inside of others. And what you seem to have so successfully done is you've gone beneath the surface and you've challenged the status quo, which is one of this is the premise of this whole podcast. Is we are flipping a middle finger to the status quo, and we're really, rebelling for the impact we want to have in the world. And you, through all these stories, are talking about massive cultural impact by simply shifting how we lead.
Yeah. And, the middle finger, if you like, or, I gained my purpose in P&G, but it wasn't really until I reached the lowest point of my career, a culture where that wasn't accepted, that I realized that it's not just important, it's critical. And, I talk a little bit about it in the TED. And, it's really the contrasts of these two experiences. Do you want me to share that a little bit?
Yeah, I would love it. We are absolutely going to put a link to your TEDx talk in the show notes because I want everybody to see it from beginning to end. But honestly, I've watched your TEDx talk so many times, and I watched it again last night. It's not a spoiler alert because I can't hear you say it enough times and I never stop getting goosebumps. So I would love for you to talk about what led you to, because this is to me so critical to why you are doing this for a living now and rebelling for this heart-led leadership and making it your life's work in essence. So yeah, can you talk about that and then kind of seeing the exact opposite and now why you're doing your work and writing your book? And I think that'll open up all kinds of juicy topics.
So, yeah, I think, it's really interesting because people often come to me with kind of pain and suffering, but it's really our pain that helps us sharpen our purpose. And, every time I tell my clients, I mean, when they're going through the hard thing, this is a gift. You can't understand it now, but this is a gift. And I got my gift, now it's going to be 6 years ago. So after, a thriving career with P&G, where we didn't talk about that one, but, another thing that I'm super proud of, is the campaign Dare to Lead Like a Run Like a Girl. You see, I converted it already.
Yeah, that's all right.
Run Like a Girl, which was in 2014, and another one of these big soulful, we were all about women empowerment, and we sat together, we were 4 marketing directors, and like, how do we elevate our equity from protection to women empowerment, and like the work that we've been doing, in India, etc. And I'm very careful not to take credit on this because this is the agency. We gave them a kick-ass brief and they came up with this idea of Run Like a Girl. And, I talk a little bit about that. And, I hope many of your listeners will also check that one out. But I also refer to it. I got permission from the CMO of Procter & Gamble to add it into the TED Talk, which is not very common. But it's really, the whole notion that you ask a young girl, what does it mean to run like a girl? And she would say, What do you mean? Run as fast as you can. But somehow, during puberty, it becomes an insult. And that's kind of what we really wanted to challenge, to reclaim that phrase like a girl to mean, be proud to be who you are. And as I mentioned, I was always really proud to be who I was. I, grew up in a culture that enabled me to, to be who I was. And I'll tell you the story of the contrast. So, first of all, my first kind of experience with P&G, as I mentioned, was an experience of flow. And being who I was just kind of part of it. And very early in my career, I think it was like 6 months into my job, way back then, I was in my boss's office, so the general manager, because one of my initiatives hit a launch, okay? And, it was something that was completely out of my control. My products were stuck in customs, and I was sitting in his office trying to figure out what we would do. And I was getting super frustrated, right? Because it wasn't in my control. I've been working on this for 3 months. It was my heart and soul kind of launch, and it wouldn't be perfect as I wanted it. And I was so frustrated and angry. And me, when I get, anytime I get emotional or frustrated, especially, I start to tear. So I'm sitting in my general manager, Shelley. I'm like, okay, it's my manager's manager, right? I'm sitting in his office and I'm tearing. And I'm like, oh my God, frantically, I'm trying to kind of regain composure. Now, my boss, his name is Jim Lafferty, he's a friend and mentor until today. He smiles at me and he offers me a box of tissues. And, I'm wiping my eyes and I'm trying to regain my composure. And then he says something to me that really carried me throughout my career. He said to me, Dalia, don't you ever be embarrassed to cry in the office again. It's a sign of your passion. And passion is your superpowers. I was so empowered. And then he says to me, and if you ever work for someone that doesn't appreciate that, walk away. They don't deserve you. Imagine, right?
Amen is all I can say.
Genius. And he lived that. And to be honest, 17 years, I had many managers like Jim, that focused on my strengths, saw my passion as a strength, not as a weakness, as a sign of passion, who nourished me, who brought out the best in me. And I was, that was why I was in flow. That was why I was able to do all this amazing work that built the business, because I was my whole, complete, authentic self.
Leading from the heart.
Completely.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you the contrast, because I think that really put it, this mirror in front of me that, Jim was so right, and this is a cause worth fighting for. So 17 years later, and I won't go too much into this, but I left P&G to become Chief Marketing Officer of Asia for another company, great company, okay? And that's kind of another learning, that you can have a great culture, but it's really your direct manager that makes the biggest impact. So took on the role. It seemed like a dream job. I was head of all marketing in Asia, 150 people, beautiful. 2 months into the role, I got a new boss, and him and I could not be more different. Okay, I always say it's like fire and water. So I was all about passion and people and positivity, and he was all about numbers and scorecards and ROI. And sometimes we jokingly said that it was ROI or you die. Sure, some of our listeners can resonate because share the numbers later, but sadly, that's all too common in the business world today. So anyway, I was being myself, right? As I was kind of used to be. And, in one of our first meeting, he said to me, my boss, he said, Dalia, I'm not going to waste my time on what you're good at. I'm only going to focus on what you need to fix.
Ouch.
Okay? Ouch. And then this is for you, Shelley. And then he added, and don't kid yourself, there's no art in marketing. It's only science, right?
Whew,
That
that
gave me the
is a
right.
match made in hell. I think isn't that what you said in the TED Talk? I was like, yes, indeed. I've been in those relationships. It's fucking painful.
Painful because it's so different. Now, how do you stay authentic in this relationship, right? How do you stay, what do you do? How much do you keep? How much do you evolve, right? How do you not only survive but thrive? So I was quite a feisty little girl, if you like, right? I was raised in a culture where conflict is respect because, I speak my mind. Amy Edmondson talks about psychological safety, about, being able to speak your mind, to bring yourself, because when you speak your mind, you're moving things forward.
Yeah.
You're able to create. I mean, there's a reason why Israel is a startup nation, because, this openness is helping innovation and bringing things forward. So I was trying to be myself, and maybe a few months into the role, I was kind of summoned, and I use this story because it's such a contrast. So I'm summoned into my boss's office, and I was in another meeting. He used to kind of summon me like the headmaster. I was the only woman in the leadership team, and another important dimension that I learned is the dimension of mirror leadership. People mirror the leader. When the leader is in a good mood and behaves well, his people will mirror him. And sadly, the same happens to the opposite. And that's kind of it. It became a lot of great people. My colleagues were great people. And that's what shocked me. But there was an openness to acceptance of judgments and cutthroat. And so this was kind of the environment. So anyway, I'm pulled into the office, and he started berating me, okay, and feedback. And I love feedback. I believe feedback is the cornerstone of great leadership. But feedback needs to be candor with care.
Oh, this is
Tough
daring leadership.
love. This is complete,
Yes.
right? Tough love. We used to call it in P&G tough love. Don't sugarcoat things. You're just hurting your people more. Okay, but they need to know that it comes from the heart, and then it lands with the heart. So I'm all for tough love, but I can tell you that day there was no love in that room. It was just berating and really humiliating, very personal, very, beyond the professional feedback. And I'm holding it in. So now I'm a C-suite woman, right? The only woman in the team. So I'm really holding it in. And then he moves to insult my team. And that's when I became a lioness, You know how it is when your
Oh, this
team
is Mama Bear.
so hard. It wasn't Mama Bear. This was like, it was claws were out, how dare you? You know how hard they were working. And I was so angry and frustrated. And as I told you, when I get frustrated, I tear. Now I'm sitting in his office, and a tear comes into my eyes, and he smiles at me, and he offers me this box of tissues. And I had this warm, fuzzy feeling, remembering Jim, right? And then I noticed something almost kind of weird in his smile. He turns around the tissue box. And Shelley, I know you've seen it before, but my heart sank. On the other hand of that tissue box, he had a handmade sticker that read Dalia's tissue box. As if he knew I would come in, he knew I would start crying, and he prepared this joke. And it was so denigrating. I literally was stunned. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, with the little dignity that I had. I mean, this is an HR assault. And he's like, oh, come on, Dalia, stop being so emotional. This is boy banter. I know you have a sense of humor. Boy banter. I hate that word. Boy banter is bullying. Okay. And there's no sense of humor when it comes to denigrating other people. And I can tell you, I think the reason I'm telling the story, and it's really not about the personalities. It's really about, what happened to me after that. So I told you I'm a feisty girl. So I'm like, I'm not going to quit. Why should I quit? I love what I'm doing. I love my team. He should quit, right? So I became even more resilient. And first year when you're attacked, right? And this is kind of, I studied that and I spent a lot on, they say research is me search, right? You want to understand kind of what went on there. Why did I stay? What else could I do? So first year I was like, when you're attacked, your natural instinct is fight. And I was all about defending myself and fighting back and giving feedback, because I grew up, right, in authenticity and congruency. And I kept on thinking I can coach him. And, why do you need, I once told him, why do you need to stab and then turn? Isn't enough just to stab? I was trying to use humor, but in a way to give feedback, that's not the way to kind of manage me. And I ended up realizing that the more kind of resilient I became, the more, harsh he became. So the next year, right, there's fight and then there's flight. So the next year, I said to myself, I was an executive coach. I did my coaching course at the time. And I said, okay, there's a lesson for me. Okay, I really believe that every hardship has a lesson. So let me shut up and listen. And all I did that year is try to listen and fix. I was obsessed with fixing everything that he thought needed fixing. Okay. And I hired a data scientist and we focused solely on numbers and scorecard. And at the end of that year, I fell sick. We delivered the scorecard, but I lost my soul. And that's where I fell sick. And I can tell you, what kind of my wake-up call, because people said, what changed? In the beginning of year 3, I actually attended a P&G alumni event. Okay, for the first time, I flew to Cincinnati. And the feeling, I walked into the room, and the first presentation I still remember was servant leadership. And I just sat down, like I plunked in my chair and I said, this is home. This is how it needs to be. It's not that I'm crazy, right? This is how it needs to be. And then that kind of shook me. And I realized that, I'm in a toxic environment and, I need to get out. But I'm a very result-driven person. And I made all these commitments to the CEO and to my people. So I made the decision that I'm going to give myself another year, but I am going to drop the fear, because for the first time ever, there was fear. I every email I sent, I spent an hour going over it to make sure, because I knew I would be grilled like crazy. That's insane. Think about productivity.
Well, it is. And this is where we're driven to when you said it. Like, psychological safety is key. Google did that study, their Project Aristotle study, that said that is the number one trait of high performing teams. So when you don't feel safe, you're not performing your best. You're not bringing your best self to work.
The brain is hijacked, okay? Because our amygdala, our emotional center, and our frontal cortex, where our rational thinking, I always say they operate like a seesaw. When one is aroused, the other one is depressed. And literally I I wouldn't say dumb. I know I'm smart. I know my numbers. But when you're in situations of fear, I remember a situation where I mixed up exchange rates, okay, and numbers. Okay, I was talking in dollars instead of, anyway, it was just, your brain is just not functioning. And I later on researched it, and that's the first thing that happens to us. So we're not productive. People think that fear, maybe that archaic command and control style of management was right, when we were industrial line, when it was all about simple tasks. But when we need to create, we need to bring art, we need to manage people, this is conducive, it's ineffective. So I said to myself, okay, I'm going to leave, but not before I drop my fear and I bring my heart and my art back into the workplace. Now, he wanted science, and I was determined to prove that marketing is science and art. And, together with my team, we created a campaign, and, I wouldn't go too much. It was for a washing machine, but it was bringing the passion back into washing machine through your favorite item. Okay, that's what you're passionate about. And it was called, fashion care, and it was all about kind of anyway, it was very, very outrageous for the category and the situation, but it was also very data driven. We created a whole model there. So it was really about learning to, the win-win, giving him what he needed but not losing myself. And, that was the key thing that kind of I learned, that, stop being externally validated, so dependent on external validation, right? And trust your own strengths, because it's only that third year when I came back to my strengths that I was able to succeed. And yeah, those 3 years were challenging, but as you said, that's why I'm here today. And I decided to turn my pain into my purpose. So that's just a little how I got to it.
I love it. And that really, like, walking away from that after your success, but understanding the stark contrast between those two cultures was what really inspired one of the platforms you stand on is Dare to Lead Like a Girl.
Yeah.
Because what you're really talking about is getting in touch with that feminine energy, which is very heart-led, which is very people-driven. Right. So I'm super curious. How else do you describe it when somebody says, what does it mean to dare to lead like a girl and create, conditions in an organization or a culture to be able to do that? What does it look like? What guidance do you give?
So, I think the Dare to Lead Like a Girl is a provocation, right? It's built on the Like a Girl. It's paying homage to that campaign. And it's really, I'm not talking only to women. I'm talking to all leaders, right? Because we all have, there's no female or masculine brain. We all have feminine traits and masculine traits. So Lead Like a Girl is being able, a leader. I really believe that great leadership is genderless, right?
Mm-hmm. Amen.
Completely. But it's being able, my friend Nili Mabat talks about it as a continuum, okay? There's positive feminine, which is all around empathy and teamwork. Yeah, because we were the gatherers. We do, and this is scientifically proven, we do sit with empathy longer, okay? Men often, and it's the classical, sit with empathy for a minute, and then the area in their brain that is about problem solving jumps up and they come into solutions. So men, if you're listening, okay, sometimes your woman just wants to share. She doesn't want you to fix. So sit with there. Empathy is just really trying to understand the world from the other person's point of view. So empathy and teamwork and, intuition, right? I'm big into Buddhism and the importance of the female intuition. In Buddhism, wisdom is actually female because it's all around wisdom through intuition. Okay. Then we have the positive masculine, and that's where data and logic and direction come in. And we need that. We need both. Okay. So great leadership is really flowing between the two. But what happens in the business world today is that the business world sank to what Nilima calls wounded masculine. And wounded masculine is this world of scarcity. It's this world, as we spoke about, where competition, where power over people, where really this archaic model of, I need to bring someone else down to win. It's this constant win-lose mindset.
Yeah.
Now, the interesting thing is, so that's where the business world is today. And when I say dare to lead like a girl, it's dare to lead more like a girl. It's shifting the pendulum. So we're more in the positive masculine, positive feminine world. But the interesting thing, it's also for women, that there is also the wounded feminine. The wounded feminine is when we're attacked by a wounded masculine, we drop into that, weaker state of dependability, defending, over-reliance. And it's interesting because when I reflect back, for 17 years, I was in this positive, I'm a kick-ass, I'm a result-driven, fast decision maker, daring, logic, right? The positive masculine, but I really believe that it's with people, that it's with teams that you get the best results. But in this 3 years when I was attacked by a wounded masculine, I dropped into my wounded feminine as well. I allowed my strength to be questioned. I spent most of my energy defending myself. That's what fear did to me. And if it did it to me, I really believe, it can happen to anyone, because I really grew up, fearless. But yet when you're constantly attacking, and that kind of became a game, you also start questioning yourself. And that's why I'm on a mission also for women to stop questioning ourselves, to really dig into our superpowers and step up, right, into that courage of leading like a girl. Okay, so this is both for men to step into their more feminine traits and for women to own them, to be proud of them. It's a strength, and we're seeing it, in the world today, right, with COVID, and 7 out of the 9 more effective countries were, led by women. And you mentioned, the recent Harvard Business Review that talks about.
Yes. Okay. I've got to highlight this because as I was telling you before we started recording, this was one of those, I have goosebumps again. This was from everything that you're saying and the synchronicity of what happened. So just to put a finer point, I mean, the most dangerous thing that can happen is that we doubt our own superpowers. And that's exactly what you just described. So I just want to shine a light on that again to say, yes, to everyone who's listening, our fellow rebel souls, like this is our strength. This is what we're rebelling for. Like rebel for your superpowers and bring them into whatever work you're doing in the world. Dalia, your stories all just so beautifully support that. And talking about the power of tapping into our feminine energy as leaders, whether masculine or feminine. This Harvard Business Review research was so interesting. So it dropped into my inbox last night from my business partner, Lori, who had no idea that I was having this conversation with you today. And it's entitled, Women Are Better Leaders During a Crisis. Done, literally just conducted in December of 2020. So not, about probably a month ago, right? And the headline is exactly what you described. And it makes me giddy. Like I can't stop smiling. For those of you who aren't watching the video, like both of us are beaming right now because there is so much science behind this. And now there's really current research behind that's coming out of workplaces and out of countries in terms of female leaders handling the COVID crisis. And so This particular study was based on 360 reviews where women were rated by those who work with them as more effective and having higher engagement amongst their teams.
Yeah. And I'll
Right?
tell you the history of that research, because I actually ended up quoting it, an earlier version of it, in my TED. So my TED came out before COVID, December, okay?
Yep.
It was recorded, in December of 2019. It came out in June. And in that kind of TED, I quote a previous but similar Harvard Business Review that, in 2012, they wanted to understand why there are not enough women in leadership roles. So they did this, are women as good as men in leadership? Okay, and the answer was yes. In 2019, June of 2019, they did this research again, and they found that women actually scored better than men in 17 out of 19 leadership traits. Now, those were things like integrity, things like intuition, things like resilience, things like teamwork, okay, which we would say are more the feminine. But it was also things like risk-taking, things like, results, innovation. And that's kind of the piece that, and Paul Polman, bless him, the ex-CEO of Unilever, talks about, instead of trying to change women to fit the business world, why aren't we learning from women, right? Because there is so much proof that this working with your heart is better for business. And then this recent Harvard Business Review that you talk about brings in the current events that, when we look at countries dealing with COVID, again, my idol of the day is really Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand.
Yes.
And how she really, wow, what a leader, okay, with her 1-year-old baby, right, making fast decisions. She captured my heart still in the bombing in Christchurch, where she shed a tear with empathy, and the same day she took a very tough decision on, limiting gun use, etc. So she has this empathy and, decisiveness, moving forward, etc. And she, I put a quote of hers, that I love. Why can't empathy, compassion, and strength, work together? Why are leaders seeing empathy as a weakness? It's really our strength. And now, how she's dealing very, on the one hand, she closed the border. She was the first to close the border, really kind of decisive, fast, etc. But then on the other hand, how she's talking and, to the people, how she's bringing people together. The issue that we see in so many other markets, right, is people are not listening, people are not being disciplined. And she was able to say, guys, we're all in it together. We have to care for each other. This is the time to come together. And this notion of, if I'm not wearing a mask, I am endangering everyone, not only myself. And this bringing people together is what enabled her. So, that's really what leading more like a girl is all about. And to your point, when I decided to leave that company, I decided to take a little bit of a break, and I did my master's in organizational psychology in INSEAD. And there I kind of realized that what happened to me is, sadly, way, way too common.
Yeah.
Another kind of data that I quote that for me is so telling is the fact that, 87% of employees today are sparkless or not engaged in the workplace. They feel their companies do not embrace them as whole human beings. Only 13% are engaged at work. Only 30% have this passion at work. This is insane.
It makes
Insane.
my heart so heavy. And how do companies and the leaders within those companies expect to get creativity and innovation and purpose-driven work like what you've described in your career with people who aren't feeling it?
No,
You
exactly.
can't.
You can't. And that's the thing that sometimes people say, oh, heart, it's fuzzy, it's soft, emotional intelligence is soft. It goes straight to the bottom line. Another number that I like to quote, and there's a lot of research on that, on the cost of this, right? So only 13% engagement. Even worse, 20% are actually so engaged they're hostile at work. And the cost of that is $7 trillion in stress-related disease. So just think about it. Absenteeism, stress, just being there and not really being there. So all those managers that come and say this is soft, sorry guys, you're missing the point big term. This is as hard as it gets. $7 trillion in stress-related disease. Now, the interesting point, so that's where I did my thesis on psychological safety and psychological danger in the workplace and on what you can do. Can you coach yourself out of a toxic environment? Because as I said, research is research. I really wanted to understand, was there anything I could do differently? And I did learn that happiness and resilience can be taught. And I'll talk about that a little bit in a bit.
You are singing. Yes, let's dive into that, because you're singing the Soulbatical from the Soulbatical hymn book, right? Like you are
sisters.
I know. This is like our passion, well, our pain and our passion and purpose that came from that pain are so intrinsically connected for exactly this reason, because we've seen that burnout and that disengagement and that kind of emptiness and gone, it doesn't have to be that way.
Exactly. And I can tell you, I think the studies I already started to say, it doesn't have to be. And I told you, I think my aha that made me throw away, a lot of money and a thriving career to decide this is what I'm going to focus is when, so basically I did my thesis, my master's, and then I started in parallel also studying happiness. And I met a dear friend, Professor Tal Ben-Shahar. I can't I'm so grateful for all these people that came into my life. He has become my second career mentor, if you like. Professor Tal Ben-Shahar he hates when I say guru, so I'll call him happiness teacher. He, was he led the most popular course in Harvard for positive psychology. And today he has the Happiness Studies Academy. So we spoke in a conference, and I told a little bit my story, and he snuck in. We met the night before, and he snuck in to listen to my talk, which was amazing. And at the end, he told me, Dalia, you need to speak on TED. You need to write a book. So he kind of planted that idea in my head. And then, 2 months later, he's like, hey, why don't you join my Happiness Studies Academy? And it was like, I was in the middle of the INSEAD master, it was like a lot of work, but I said, this is universe kind of. So I joined that course. It was a special 18 months program for teachers, for coaches. And suddenly I realized that everything I knew about leadership, I knew all of this, as you do. But what I learned there is everything is grounded in research. Every single piece of my people leadership program that I developed 20 years ago, 15 years ago, was grounded in research. And suddenly it was like, wow, I had the left brain and the right brain. I had the knowledge and, the facts to prove it. And then as serendipity goes, just as I finished the course, I was approached here by Singapore Management University to teach happiness for young managers. And, Singapore is probably the epitome of this, achievement. It's a very achievement oriented society. It's a great nation. This is home for the last 10 years. There's a lot of amazing, the turnaround that this country has delivered is insane. But I think it's like everywhere in the world, the pendulum has gone too far, where people are so much around, you know, making money, achieving results. That's when kind of the key for happiness is success.
Well, this is what I call success empty, because it's success without the fulfillment. You feel empty inside, right? So many countries and cultures are celebrating that.
Yeah. And there's amazing research that shows that it's not success that leads to happiness, but happiness that leads to success. Right. And really understanding the notions of that. So I started teaching that, right? And at the university, these are 19-year-old Singaporean students. And I did a very provocative, one of my favorite workshop is Find Your Why. And I take them through a whole journey of understanding their heritage, understanding their superpowers, and how can they use that superpower to really bring it, to change the world. And one student, stood up and he said to me, Prof, I love this workshop. I know what my purpose is, but I'm going to put it aside because I have to be a corporate slave for a few years, and then I'll get to my purpose. And that word, corporate slave, right? My hair stood up, right? Because as you said earlier, I know it doesn't have to be that way. And I want to save all these young students. You don't have to be a corporate slave, because when you get into the rat race, suddenly you're 50 and you're like, what the hell went on here? And you can do the and. You can be successful and do what you love. Yes. And that really led me to what I'm doing today, which is basically taking everything that I've learned, my journey on these contrasts. So it started with understanding how myself, the same personality in one culture, I thrived. I delivered 200%. My ROI was 200%. Same person in another company that was all focused on ROI. Okay, I know they think I delivered. I know I gave 15% of my capabilities at best. And seeing that contrast and hearing that student made me decide to pivot my career and really focus on going back to the lion's den, going back to the corporate world, and working with leaders to bring back their heart to the workplace. And you asked me, what does exactly it mean? What does it mean leading more like a girl? What does it mean leading from your heart? So I typically kind of call it, coming from marketing, and you will appreciate, I call it my 5P model. Okay, I hate to say I created it because it's based on, different leaders. Martin Seligman calls it PERMA, and, Tal Ben-Shahar calls it SPIRE. But philosophers and psychologists and everyone agree that there's typically 5 areas that are critical for thriving. Okay, it's the idea of mind, body, and soul. So on the mind side, okay, the first P, I simplified it and called it 5P, easy to remember. My first P is around purpose. And that's what I spent, and that's what I spent the beginning of all my kind of program, because if you don't know what your superpowers are, you are not able to be happy. This is the base of everything. He who has a why can endure any how, said Nietzsche.
Yes.
Right? That is the core. And, it is understanding the big picture, but understanding the small things as well. I don't know if you saw the movie Soul recently.
I did.
For me, that was like, that's my motto. Have an idea of where you're heading, but don't forget to enjoy the view on the way, because purpose is not just waiting for the one big thing and then I'll be happy. It's inserting those little magical moments into every single day. It's asking yourself, am I bringing my strengths to work every single day? That was another, Bible that changed my life. Okay, first break all the rules. 2001 Gallup did a research. Is it more important to focus on strengths or weaknesses? 60% said weaknesses. That's how we grow. But it's actually those 40% that focuses on strength that had 2 times the likelihood of succeeding. But the same research found that only 12% of employees, even today, focus on their strengths every day. So that's the first thing. Our strengths strengthen us, our weaknesses weaken us. That's what happened to me in my work. I forgot about my strengths. I was only focusing on my weaknesses, and I weakened it. Only when I went back to my strengths that I was able to succeed. So the first P is all around find your purpose. Work with a coach. Find a way to dig deep inside. Look at what you're doing. What do I love about what I'm doing? What am I good at? And how can I bring it together to contribute to what the world needs?
I love that. Yeah. And I hate to rush you, but we're going to probably have to go through the next 4 P's in like 5 minutes. You good?
I'll give you the keys and we'll talk another time. But it's basically the second one is all around perseverance. Okay. This is growth mindset. This is around every failure is opportunity to growth. It's about, finding the win-win, dancing with adversity. Don't fight, don't flight. See how you can stand next to your opponents, see where they're going, understand empathy, and then lead them into a dance. That's kind of the third, and this is an obvious one, but we're not doing it as much, is physical wellness. Okay, Zoomania, right? How do you take care? Meditation, eating, movement, sleep, all of the basics. But today it's not about managing time; it's about managing energy. So that's the third one. The fourth one is people, and that's the most important one. Okay, as Harvard showed, the number one driver of happiness is people. People. How do you nourish relationships? How do you nourish relationships at work? How do you connect with the heart throughout? And, we talk that. And the last one is emotions. Okay, the P is really the perspective there, positive perspective. How do you understand your emotions? All emotions are legitimate. Okay, so we need to stop thinking that it's only positive emotions and we need to hide away the negative emotions. The negative emotions are just a mirror, a trigger to understand that we need to understand what's going on. And, the most important, emotion is gratitude. And that's what I'll end up with. It's really this understanding that, when we focus, and I'll quote, Tal Ben Shachar, and he talks about the double meaning of the word appreciate. When we appreciate the good things in our life, the good in our life appreciates.
Oh, it's one of my favorite quotes. I just got chills again. Absolutely. I mean, that's such a beautiful place to wrap this up. Let's be honest. You and I have spent hours on Zooms, and we will continue to spend hours on Zooms. And I want to invite you back because I want to dig deeper into a lot of this. I also want to respect everybody's time because I love that this community gives us an hour-ish, and they give us lots of grace when it's yummy, and this is yummy. So let me ask you this. Before I ask where everyone can find you, because no doubt people are going to want to dig a little bit deeper into your world because you're a font of knowledge and inspiration in this space. When is this book going to come out? Do you have sort of a target?
A million. So the book is written and it's now looking for a publisher. So okay. I did not to self-publish, but to go because I want this baby as wide as possible. And I'm super excited. So I hope by end of 2021. And, the mission, again, it's linked to a bigger purpose that I want 1% of the proceeds to really go towards building Lead Like a Girl schools, helping,
Yes! Oh my God, that's a brilliant vision.
And that's, and it's bringing all together. It's really men, women connecting, daring, so we can together, it's time. the world needs it. God knows how much the world needs it. So it's how can each one of us really step into our courage and lead like a girl. So hopefully,
Beautiful.
soon.
Well, I'm in your camp, and any way that I can support that mission and get that sucker published, I am all in. So let's keep talking about that. And so I don't forget, where can everyone find you? Because I'll include all kinds of the links that you talked about in your mentors and your TEDx talk and all the things. So, but where can people find you and follow you?
So I think the best is LinkedIn or my website. You can have an early sign up for the book to be invited for the launch. There's also a few free webinars there. I think if this resonates, I would be so grateful if you would share. Anyone who's looking, share the TED. I think that's our way to create a dent in the world, to lift others as we rise, and to continue, bringing this kind of heart so we can all be, more resilient and happy at work. So LinkedIn, website, would love to connect with all of your listeners.
Amen, fellow rebel souls. So Dalia, thank you. I love talking to you. I learn something new every time. And I'm blown away by all of the science that you have to support this purpose as well. And I learn something new every time. So thank you. I'm blown away, and I don't want to end this, but I'm going to because I have to.
Your passion to bring, because it's this when we're fighting for, rebelling for. I love that. That when you're in a struggle, that's when you really understand, your passion. So I'm really, really grateful for you and for being here today.
Oh, I am so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for the work you're doing in the world. And thank you for inspiring all of us and reminding us of our freaking superpower and to really tap into our hearts. And yes, sister, thank you. Thanks you guys for listening, for hanging on. Some of these conversations I love so much, and they're so juicy, and I want you to get the benefit of them. So I let them go on for a little bit longer because, well, hell, it's my show and they can. And also, why would we want to cut off all of this goodness, you guys? There's lots of bad news in the world. So for me, I just love the idea that we can keep spreading inspiration. And I hope it got you guys all one step closer to your happiness, bringing more joy and resilience into your workplace, and really leading from the heart. So thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Dalia, thank you. Bye. Hey, Rebel. Thanks for listening. If you were inspired by what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and review so our fellow Rebel souls can find us. We have big work to do together. And if you want to dive deeper, head on over to my website at soulbatical.com and follow me at Soulbatical on Instagram. Until next time, stay bold, brave, and badass, and never stop asking, what am I rebelling for?